Hi, good morning to you all, and it's week 5. You've made it this far. Some of you only just. So we're on to week 5, and it is communicative language teaching. Welcome to Home Language FET and Senior Phase. Nice to chat to you again. So there we go, my first slide. You'll see that Teaching English First Additional is also on here. It's a similar presentation because the theories behind the approach to communicative language teaching, or CLT, is basically required for both. So although it is firstly an FAL type of approach, it is totally perfect for the home language classroom as well. Perfect for it. So just a few little housekeeping tips. I have been inundated with emails this week. You can imagine with the submission of all the assignments, work tasks, late registrations, etc. So when you're emailing me, try and make it easy for me. Right, I need a descriptive heading. So be aware that I've got 131 students and 4 different courses. I teach both home language and FAL. I teach both FET and Senior Phase. So on your heading, please put your specialization and the task or the activity or the query. So as soon as I see your email, I know exactly who you are, what you are taking, and what the problem is, without having to go try and delve into 2 million lines of dialogue before I know what you want. Right, so always give your specializations. If you're asking me about anything, first tell me who you are and what you are taking. Don't just say first additional language. It means nothing to me. I need to know SP, FET. I need to know it's home language, SP, FET. There are different courses, and I need to differentiate between all of those. Right. Also refer to specific issues, specific activities, what numbers were, what the weeks were. This all enable me to unravel what you're trying to tell me. So, for instance, an email like this is really confusing, and I get many like this. So I could not submit. Tell me, what could you not submit? Was it your activity 1? Was it the CAPS 1? Was it the CAPS 2? Was it the on-tracking quiz? There are many things that you need to submit. Let me know exactly what it is. Yesterday. When is yesterday? Give me a date. This must be very specific. This is so important for communication. And I know there's load shedding, there's no electricity. I've heard many issues arising in the last week. I'm also experiencing load shedding. I'm in a in-between time now, but I also have to shuttle to and fro because of load shedding. Right, you tried submitting all the issues that you have had with that, but there is no submission. Yeah, there's no submission if it has closed. And I've warned you, please check your submission dates. This is going to be my next slide. Please check your submission dates because it closes. And then there's no little tag for you to insert your submission. Please also, again, reiterate what your specialization is, what you're referring to. FET, Senior Phase, Home Language, First Additional Language. I need to know that all the time. And then please do not use the do not reply email, because I immediately say reply, and guess what happens on my 2 line? It says do not reply. Then what I have to do? I have to go and search for your Embury email. This all takes time, and it's quite tedious as well. So save me the hassle. Please do not use the do not reply email. Please use your official Embury email. This all saves me time. When it's only 1 student or 2 students, it's fine, but when there's 40 students, it becomes a bit tedious as well. Right. Okay, this is a note on activities, assignments, tasks, and so on. Yes, another headache for me. Please check your submission dates. I said to all the activities for weeks 1, 2, and 3 were closing on the 8th of March, and it did. Sorry, that's what happens when it's closing. At that time, it closes. The only extensions I'm granting are now to late registrations. Please, if you need to submit in your late registration, I need this verified, and there are certain dates when everything will have to be completed. I think Ms. Trim said by the 25th of March, all submissions will have to be completed. But please let me know. I can see that at least 50% of you that still have not submitted. Right, Turnitin. This is with assignment 1. Assignment 1, Turnitin reports are not enabled to students. That means only I get the reports. So You cannot wait for the Turnitin report before you submit. Submit together, both of them at the same time. I will get the report. Okay, I know you're all dying to know what your plagiarism reports are. Most of you are quite low. Some are 0, 3%, 4%, 6%. Then I've got the 10, 14. I thought I was under 20 for most of them, but today I've got a 23%. That can only mean you are possibly submitting the same, I don't know, lesson plan twice, and so you become self-plagiarizing. Remember, you have different specializations. If you are FET and SP, you cannot submit an SP for an FET course. They are different. You would not, the same teacher may teach both, and you'd have two different lesson plans. You can't submit the same one because you have to look at your FET, your course specialization, home language or FL, and the same for SP. So I need two lesson plans. I need two CAPS activities. I need two CAPS. I need all your tasks twice over, because some of you have got two specializations. Okay, you're still not sure about that? Email me and I'll try and explain again. So that's a Turnitin. With the next assignment, I will definitely turn on Turnitin, and then you can access your reports yourself. I will see them too. Right. Okay. For first additional language, this is my overview of the last 5 weeks. You can see all the red specifications, and that's what I feel like at the bottom. I feel scared when I see that, because I can see how many of you have still not submitted. I would say at least 10 to 15 of you have made contact with me, but I think the majority haven't, maybe unaware that they have got submissions that need to go in. But if you have a look at the statistics, there are 31 taking FET home language, there are 49 taking SP, and if you look at that data, I would say 50% and less have submitted. Thank you to all those who have. You've made my heart glad, and I enjoy seeing those submissions coming in. I need to start marking now, so that's going to become another headache because I'm going to have things that are not there. I'm going to go through this one. I'm going to go through 3 tasks now. The first one goes right back to week 2 when I asked you to look at assessment standards and learning outcomes. Okay, you have to go back to the CAPS document and look at them. I don't even remember, but if you go back to my PowerPoint from week 2, you'll see that this was a task you had to do. Right, I asked you to look at your specialization for grades R to 12, and then compare the assessment standards for home language and first additional. All you need to do is have the 2 CAPS documents, and you'll notice that there were no differences in content and weighting. So if you're doing home language or you're doing first additional language, there's no difference in the content that you're going to teach and the weighting for assessment standards. What is the reason for these differences and similarities was the next question. It's the same content, but only the LOs are different. Same content and weightings, but the LOs are different, the learning outcomes. Right, and there's a little direction for you to go and see Ferreira, page 15 to 16. Right, then I said, the learning outcomes, what about them? Well, they are the same for home language and first additional language. 6 learning outcomes. That is for your grades R to 12, R to 9. They're different assessment standards, however, for each prescribed LO. So although the learning outcomes are the same, the actual assessment standards for each LO are different. They're going to ask you to become more appropriate with the home language, and they won't even mention that word with the first additional language. They will say accurate and relevant with home language, but they won't use those words for the first additional language. Right. It says here in practice it's not necessary to have a rigid division between the teaching of the 2, all right? And this shows that it is part of the education policy that promotes one language for teaching and supports multilingualism. So although they're slightly different things, everything else is the same, content is the same, weightings are the same, learning outcomes are slightly different. Okay. Right, let's go back to the case study task, which is all closed now. Don't worry about it. It's on page 52 in Ferreira. It was Kalani in Mrs. Wallace's classroom, and I asked you about the BICS and the KELP questions. So the first one was to give Mrs. Wallace an explanation for his current performance in English. We can remember back, he was doing very well at speaking, but he was really battling with his writing and his exams. Right. So compare the difference. Why is there a difference between his oral and his written work? A According to Bixton Culp, this is what it is. Bixton, remember, is basic intercommunication, basic interpersonal conversational skills, your speaking skills, and his speaking skills were pretty developed, and that's why he speaks so well. However, his CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency, he's battling with this because it requires reading and writing. Okay, this isn't as developed as his Bix. So how does this have an effect on his performance? Well, speaking is context reduced, Speaking is context embedded, so it's concrete, it's easier, it uses non-verbal signs and cues, and you can work out meanings. However, exams are context reduced, so very abstract, and depend on you understanding the language. This is more challenging for many students because they don't know the meanings of words, and they don't actually know how to apply other clues to get those meanings. So possibly you could say to Mrs. Wallace, Lani needs extra time for his reading and writing tasks, and in that way you'll be able to continue and score better marks. What about your pins for your Menti.com? What is good listening? Remember last week or the week before? I'm not sure. I changed the pin. You'll see that on ECI. So how do you show good listening? I did this. I looked at it on, I think it was Sunday. And there I could see that most of you said asking questions and eye contact. Others were like body language, jotting down points. There's more questions, deliberate, attentive. All of those are very important. I did it again this morning. And again, asking questions. You can see the big print. That means it's the most popular answer, as well as eye contact. It would have even been bigger, the font, because you can see there's eye contact on the side. There's some more questions, so those are the two dominant responses. And yes, asking questions shows that you're listening, and in our culture, definitely making eye contact means that we're attempting to listen, I think. All right, going on from that. Right, what about this week? Last week we looked at oral and listening practices for teaching in our classes. Today we're going to look at the CLT, or communicative language teaching approach. And if you go into Ferreira on chapter 7, you'll find a whole chapter in that as well. Right. Okay, let's get a definition of what communicative language teaching is. It's one of the most outstanding approaches to teaching additional language. Remember I said in our introduction, home language is not FAL, but the approaches and methodologies are equally appropriate to both FAL and for home language. All right. But it emphasizes the role of communication in the language learning process. So how to communicate and how that aids us in our language learning. So for the CLT approach, we have to gain communicative competence. That means when I speak to others, you have to understand what I'm saying. When you speak to me, I must be able to understand what you're saying. So if I'm going to ask at the shop for a certain item, I must be competently able to say what I need to say. May I please have a loaf of bread? What is the time? Is there going to be load shedding? Have we been in touch with anybody with the coronavirus? All these things that are so important nowadays. Right. It doesn't matter that you're not accurate or totally correct in the way you ask it, as long as they can understand. You might go into the shop and say, bread. I think they'll understand what you're saying. So you haven't said the whole sentence. It's not totally correct, but they will have the meaning. You've competently said what you want to say. I try this all the time in closer classrooms. It's Igamalam, Emasel, and I hope they understand me. My pronunciation might not be totally correct, but they laugh. They understand what I'm trying to say. If I say Bala, they know they must write. If I say Funda, they know they must read. So I try my isiXhosa and my isiZulu, because I can Kuluma a little bit as well. And I try, and hopefully they will understand. Sometimes my pronunciation is really horrible. They might not get the meaning, and then I'm not being communicatively competent at that point. Okay. Right, and this is what Benjamin Franklin said, which I think is quite important. Tell me, if you just tell me something, I forget it often. Remember what we said about listening? Teach me, and I may remember something, but if you involve me, I will learn. And this is communicative competence you are practicing something so that you are involved in the language learning process, then that's where you actually learn to do it. If I just tell you all the time as teacher and you never practice or do it, you're not going to learn the structures. Okay. Right, where does it come from, this CLT approach? Well, it goes right back to Noam Chomsky's theories in the 1960s, way before you were all born. Yes, not before I was born. Right. And he focused on competence for performing in language learning rather than a concern for correct grammar. So people are been so stuck on correct grammar that they've forgotten that people need to communicate competently rather than speaking totally correctly. This also went on, there is Noam Chomsky. This continued in the 1970s with Michael Halliday, who studied language functions, the functionality of language, how we use it to achieve things, and how it is expressed through grammar. Not correct grammar, but we need language to say it. Going on to Del Hines, he introduced the idea of wider communicative competence instead of Chomsky's narrow linguistic competence, that you only know how to do something linguistically, you know where the verb goes, you know where the subject goes, you know where the object goes, you know where the adjective goes, and you're competent linguistically, you know your tenses, but when it comes to communicate, you've got no idea. I've taught English second language for a long, long time, and a lot of my students know the drills of what past continuous is. They can recite them, they know them. However, they go and write an essay or they try and speak to me and they get everything wrong. So that's the narrow linguistic competence they've achieved, but they haven't achieved communicative competence yet. Right, and then in the 1970s to the early 1980s, they were very concerned that traditional language teaching methods were not being successful in the language classroom. The whole thing about repeating, modeling, all the traditional ways correcting were not working, and so there was increased demand for other language learning approaches. So that's where we're emerging from. Right, so CLT is an approach to language teaching where we need to convey ideas, our ideas and meaning, as more important than being correct and accurate. So that's a big thing we need to stress in the classroom, that correct pronunciation, correct words, correct structures are not that important. If you understand what the student is saying in the second language classroom, in the target language, they are being communicatively competent, and that's important to draw that part. Right, we're going to emphasize language for communication, for meaning, various contexts, whether it's in the classroom, in the playground, in the office, in the shops, at home, and we're going to use it to perform different kinds of tasks, to give directions, to ask questions, and to socially interact. What did you say? Tell me again. Let me take notes from that. To do this effectively, students need reasons to communicate. So if they've got a reason to communicate, you must probably find they'd be more willing to do it. They need to give me directions of how to get to the shop, and they need to tell me how to get, upload my new program and things like that. Those are instructions they need to be able to say. And I, as a teacher, must provide the opportunities for them to practice this. However, in the target language, not in their mother tongue. That's not the meaning, what we're going to try and find. It's to use these opportunities to practice structures for meaning, but they must use target language. And it doesn't matter if they make mistakes. And then students become aware, remember Krashen, the effective filter. If they become fearful, they're going to lack confidence and they're not going to want to try. So they need practice. This looks like quite a complex little table, but this is the different areas of authentic communication that we need to use to promote competence in communication. If you have a look in the first little square, top left, it's linguistic competence. So they will have to know vocab, they will have to know sentence formation, pronunciation, spelling, semantics. That's how you start gaining the grammar of the language. So they will need that as well, and that can be practiced. Secondly, they're going to need sociolinguistic competence. That means how do you say things with a nice tone, appropriately, politely? What about idiomatic expressions? What about cultural references? What about our intentions? What about formality? Can I say to my teacher, hey ma'am, or do I have to say, dear ma'am? Okay, how do we actually address people? Can I be too formal? Can I be too informal? Can I be too consultative? How should I approach people? If I'm going for an interview or anything like that, how do I approach the person? Right, so how do I shake hands? Do I shake hands? Nowadays, you're not supposed to shake hands, but how do I use these means of politeness to express myself? Thirdly is strategic competence. This is when I think about verbal and non-verbal language to enhance my speech. How can I compensate for breakdown in turn taking? How do I move from the silence that ensues to keep the conversation going? How can I make deliberate choices to make people feel comfortable? How can I choose words that are more meaningful when I'm speaking? My soft voice, my high voice, my cross voice, my smiley voice. Okay. So I don't want to make people feel stressed. So what do I do to avoid making people feel stressed? The last quadrant is discourse competence. This is how I use language for my writing, for my speaking. So it means I write, people will actually understand what I'm saying, so it is meaningful. Think about your emails. Are they discoursely competent? When I read them, can you understand them? I actually realized I made quite a few errors too, because I am typing at a demon speed, trying to get everything out, and I don't always read what I've written, and then there will possibly be someone not understanding what I've said. So do you do the same? I need to check mine more often. So coherence and meaning in speech as well as in writing is also part of authentic communication and our competence in the language. It's not only speaking, it's linguistically, sociolinguistically, it's strategically and discoursally competent in the way we use language. Quite complex. Right. Those are all the different sections that are part of authentic communication, using the phone effectively, different kinds of media, writing, making announcements, emailing, discussing, going to different sites, having conversations and chats, all parts of communication. These are all things we can bring into the classroom where they can practice writing emails, making telephone calls, interviewing other people, making announcements, reading, writing, and so on. So what happens in our CLT classroom? Oh, I've got that repeated. I have to take one out. Well, it should be a learner-centered classroom because the target language practice is a priority. And you as a home language teacher, you don't need to practice. You know the language, but you need your students to practice. So you're going to give the ball over to them so this can happen in the classroom. You're going to set up context in speaking, writing, listening, reading, and practicing so they can practice communicating meaning. So that's what your job is now, to give them context where they can practice in these different skills. You're going to give them many opportunities in the target language to practice. And a good way to do this is group work, pairs, think, pair, share, with you just supporting, walking around, facilitating the groups, guiding, help, assisting, not being the teacher-centered person. Remember teacher talk? I'm going to come back to that. And as their confidence grows, you can become more the facilitator. You don't have to support, you just making sure the groups are working, that they are speaking, you're monitoring what is happening. Yes, the learner should speak more than the teacher. Do you remember in our previous listening conversation lecture, I said teachers speak 70 to 80% of the time and students only 19, 20%. That'll have to change. It'll have to become inverted. So teachers only 10 or 15%, 20%, and your learners speaking a lot more in the classroom. This means, which all teachers seem to hate, that the classroom is noisy. I always say to my students, doesn't matter if the classroom is noisy. That means they are talking, they're having fun often, and they are using the language. Just monitor that. Look at this for CLT. There we've got group work working nicely. I can see no teacher there, which is quite nice. And they really seem to be interacting and sharing ideas. This is an authentic learning situation where the target language is hopefully being practiced. Here's another one. Working together, no teacher. group-centered, maybe pairs working together, they are communicating, they're doing work together. This is the kind of classroom we need. Okay. Right, so your teaching role is going to be switched in the CLT. You're not going to be the teacher-centered person, you're going to be the learner-centered person. So your learner's learning becomes more important than the teacher teaching. Does that make sense? Your teaching is only as good as learners have learned. So as I was saying, if they all know the past continuous form and they're going to write an essay and they get it all wrong, that means they've learned nothing. So I can drill them in something. They might not apply it in their writing. That means I haven't been very effective as a teacher. So by practicing it in authentic situations will make them more able to use the language competently. There's your star. So this can be challenging for teachers who like to speak all the time, I think. But focusing on learner achievement can be satisfying, yes, and rewarding. There's your star going, showing that you've accomplished what you needed to do. Your students walk out, they've had fun, they've learned something, and they've used the target language. Right, so benefits for the learners are that they're going to become increasingly competent in the target language. It's a great goal to have. They're going to be more motivated in your classes because they're going to be doing things that are authentic and real, not made up, not play. And they're going to have meaningful interaction with each other. They're going to brainstorm together. They're going to solve problems. They're going to work out meaningful words to use. They're going to deduce meanings and so on. And they're going to be able to speak and use produce their writing output as well. So equal importance not only to speaking, but also production accuracy as well. Right, so these are just general, there are 10 tips here that I'm going to give you on CLT guidelines. First two is less teacher talk time. Okay, these guidelines are quite important because you're going to apply them in a case study just now, one of your tasks. And you're going to let the students find out for themselves, discovery method. You're not going to tell them everything, okay? So you're going to allow them to find out and you're going to talk less. You're going to use your questions. Remember our question types, our display questions, our referential questions, elicitation questions. Display questions. Do you know the time? Yes, everybody knows the time. So referential questions, you'll say, what time is it a good time to come visit you tomorrow? And then they will have, you don't know the answer, so they're going to actually try and work it out and give you back a lot of language. So the type of questions are quite important that you use in the classroom. And remember, elicitation is when you check what they know. You know the answer. You're not sure if they know the answer, so you're checking with those questions. I think this needs to go back to lecture 3 if you're not too sure what I'm talking about. Scaffold the learning, help them in stages, start with simpler things, building up to more complex, reflective type learning. So you'll start with maybe a brainstorming, then you're going to classify the information, then you're going to write sentences, then you're going to write an essay, so you're going to take them through the different stages. Please use group work or pair work. Don't let your students sit by themselves all the time. This is a time when they're going to use the target language. If they do throw in the odd word in their mother tongue, it's okay. Don't stress too much about that. But please use group work in your classes or some kind of pair sharing. Supportive, that they don't feel threatened in your classroom, that they feel they're going to have fun, that they like being with you, that you're supporting them, you're not making them feel bad, they're not scared to try using the language, they're not going to be made to feel bad if they don't use the correct words, you're not going to correct them in front of others. Those things are all important with effective filter to keep that low, according to what Krashen said. Authentic tasks, real stuff to do, not things that you're making up, things that are important to their age groups, things that are relevant to them. My grandson's very concerned about the coronavirus, and now that it is in South Africa, he's even more terrified. So I would say teachers for grade 4 should possibly be talking about the coronavirus because it is very of great concern to many of those young learners as well. Drawing their prior knowledge. What do they know about stuff? I mean, you'll be surprised. My 2 grandsons and their friends were chatting in the car on the way to a cricket match, and I was shocked about the knowledge that they were sharing with each other. right from travels to types of animals to what the dung beetle does. So they have got a great deal of prior knowledge. Use it in the classroom. Children and learners can share with each other and build on their own prior knowledge as well. Interactive patterns of teaching. So there's always interaction happening, but you can vary them from group work to poster work to searching work. So there's all different kinds of tasks you can give them. And finally is allow them to monitor their own learning. I was in a classroom last week where they were correcting each other's reading comprehensions. They really battled. They were grade 8s. Did not really know how to tick. Teacher, I said a red pen should be used, and somebody didn't have a red pen. I went around and said, it doesn't matter, just use any color pen, but they had no idea how to correct. So give them opportunities to monitor each other's learning, to correct, to give information, and it mustn't only be the teacher doing this. This teaches them important skills for the future as well. Okay. Right, what about errors? You might say, oh, accuracy seems to be so important. I'm not allowing them to say it correctly. So what about errors? Whoops, they've made a mistake. CLT tolerates errors because they are part of the natural outcome of developing your communication skills. I was in New York quite a while ago, and I went to go and get a plug for the bath. Do you know what I'm talking about? Plug for the bath. Why would I want a plug? Because when I wanted to run a bath, the water would all go down the plug, so I needed a plug for the bath. Okay, with South Africa, I think we all should understand. And I went to the little grocery department across the road, and I said, can I please have a plug for the bath? He had no idea what I was saying. It was an error. Eventually, after demonstrating what I was wanting with the water going into the bath and flowing out, he said, oh, you want a stopper for the tub. Okay, I used the wrong words. So stopper is the plug for the tub is the bath, and the stopper is the plug. So I used the wrong words. So often meaning might break down if people do not know the words or the vocab or the pronunciation. Right. So let's look at a strong and weak CLT situation context. Which communication is more authentic if you look at these two contexts? Okay, the first one, you teach the linguistic means of communication to facilitate communication. So you want to teach them linguistically how to say something. So you offer learners notions and functions to express politeness. So you might say, if you want to say something politely, you must say, may I borrow your pen, please? Okay, so you're saying you've got to be polite. May I come to your class? May I come in? May I ask you a question? Right, so I'm showing politeness. That is my context. Or what about, I'm using communication as a means of learning how to communicate as well. And I'm using shopping as my topic. And I'm going to get the students to perform a role play of what they do when they go to the shops. Okay. Which one is the more authentic communication? The one where they are practicing what they do when they go to the shops, or the one where they're learning notions of how to express politeness? I would say definitely when they practice the roles, they're actually doing it. You can have the shopkeeper, you have the person going to buy stuff. I was in a IsiXhosa class a while back, I think it was a grade 7 class, where they were practicing setting the table. And the teacher didn't just tell them what to do. They had to get there and put the amapaletis on, ikomishi, the knives and forks, I don't know what that is. But they set the table, and as they were saying, the one child would say to them, where's the plate? Okay, so I'm not sure how to say this, but they would say that, and the person would bring the plate. Okay, so they're practicing how to set the table. Same thing with the shop, same kind of role play, booking a flight, applying for a driver's license. These are all ways that you could practice what you should say. Right, I'm going to take you through the 4 skills now and just show different things that could be done in the classroom in a CLT approach, using a CLT approach. If I'm speaking, it's a speaking class, I'm going to provide them opportunities to discuss and share what they are learning. So they must have those opportunities, and as a teacher, I must provide them. We're going to use target vocab, that means our home language vocab. We can discuss it before. And we're going to have authentic speaking situations. What are we going to speak about? What is it? Shopping, making a doctor's booking, ordering something online. How are we going to do it? We can identify the vocab and the kinds of patterns that they might need to learn. I'm not too keen on that, but it could come into the task as well. And there is a Ferreira's got an example on page 93. So let's have a look at this. Within my tasks, I got them to do a little searching, and their topic was 3 things they need to do before something. And I gave them a whole list of things that they needed to do. So you could say 3 things to do if you want to pay a fine, 3 things to do if you want to get your driver's license, 3 things to do if you want to book a vacation. And they had to just find pictures of those 3 things, and then they would have to discuss what each one would be. So they have got something to do. They've got an activity to do, and how would they do it? So one was 3 things to do if you want to go on a diet. So someone chose that. What were the 3 things you would have to do if you wanted to go on a diet? Okay. Book a vacation. What 3 things would you have to do if you wanted to book a vacation, which is quite interesting. And then 3 things to do before you choose your husband or your wife. So that could be quite interesting. What 3 things should you do if you want to marry someone? Okay, some very interesting presentations came out of that. And then, of course, you'll present this to the class. There's also a group work task. Provide 5 reasons to support. You can see there's a whole lot of topics here, and I'll go through them. Smoking, not smoking. So 5 reasons in your group to say why you're not going to smoke, why you should wear seatbelts, why there should be compulsory student drug tests. They did that quite well. Respectful clothing, healthy eating habits, CCTV in open spaces, why you should have that. Banning of cell phones in class and exams. Blood donations, why that should happen. Online teaching, why that should happen, as we're doing here. Restricting social media use at school, why that would be. And then, so I'm going to go back. So each of them would choose one of those topics, and then they would give the 5 reasons and report back on that. This is now the next skill is writing. So you can provide them with authentic audiences for their writing. It could be the class, it could be the teacher, it could be the school, it could be the newspaper, it could be the public at large, and the purposes. Then you can brainstorm those topics in groups. You can complete someone else's story. You can design brochures and advertisements. You can write emails and letters. You can read your writing to your peers to get feedback. You can submit your writing to your school, your class magazine. You can provide peer feedback. Also, you can write reports on school issues for your school newspaper, or you can send your letters to the press. Lots of authentic writing with authentic audiences that you can practically do, not only your teacher all the time. So you might give them this little report, this graph, this graphic showing the result of sales of different kinds of games. You can see the blue line is called Pro Football. Then you've got Alien Rescue. I think that one's down at the bottom. And then I can't see the other ones behind my face, but there's the 3rd one. And you can ask them to describe the different sales for these different video games, and then what the trends are, what they would suggest, which one should they stop, which one should they continue with, and so they can come up with a whole report and recommendations for the company. TED Talks are amazing, and you can get amazing information from them on any kind of topic that you need, and the students will also find me quite fascinating. This is a whole mind map that a group put together on use of Google Glasses, and it's just watching a TED Talk and how they put it together using different mind-based software. So it is quite impressive, and they did a presentation on this as well. Right, also you can use Wordle.net with something like Menti.com, writing a piece of writing and then sticking it on Wordle.net, and it forms a word cloud, and you can see what the most important ideas were in any piece of writing, and that will enable you as a group to go and identify the key points, see which was the most effective words. Here you can see culture, development, UAE also were words that we use all the time. There's another word cloud with citizens, development, union. These are ways, interesting and exciting ways that you can go and check what the main ideas are of anything and easily get a feel for what's going on in that article. A thing that I always do, I don't think you can see the outline very well, I get the students to draw their foot outlines on a piece of white paper. The first problem is to get them to take the shoes off. And I've told them all that no one's foot is ever bigger than an A4, and I've been proved to be true. That's fact. So they all can draw their feet outline. I said they've got to draw their own foot outlines. They've got to actually draw their foot outline. And the task is to write a message of what their foot would say to them. Just one sentence, 14 words. If your foot could say anything to you, what would it say? It might be something quite good. Hey, Marcel, I just love the way you pamper me, and that colored toenail, this color of the varnish on your toenails, blue, is really my favorite. And so whatever. Or, Marcel, you really need to cut your toenails. They are really digging into me, and I'm feeling quite fed up with you. So any kind of conversation your foot could have with you. Then what you do is each of them will move their foot story. Sentence one will be moved down the class, down, 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 down. And the person at the end will bring their sentence to the first person. And then that person has to read what the first person wrote and continue the story, another sentence of 14 words. So if it's the happy story of me, the blue nail polish, the person will go on about that. Or it's a story about me cutting my toenails, somebody might take to me for a pedicure after that. So the story goes on, and you do this 4 times. So it moves 4 times. Eventually the owner gets their foot back, and they're quite fascinated with the story. There you can see what that foot looks like and the different sentences that arise. And there you can see that's one of my models that I made. There's the foot, and this person started, hey dude, and the 4 little sentences. And then what we do is we do a linking exercise with this. First of all, we look at all ideas that were repeated, and they must underline them. Then we look for all pronouns that were repeated, they must underline them or circle them. Then we look for all transitional devices, and then they must circle them or underline them, and then we count them up. And you normally find the person with the most linking words and repetitions has got the best paragraph. And 20 plus is normally quite a good paragraph. 10 under is quite a bad paragraph, and then you can discuss what makes good writing, what makes bad writing, and they've had the fun part of writing as well. So if anyone wants more ideas on that, I can send you more ideas on that technique. Okay, right, here's another piece of writing which is also quite authentic. It's called Texting While Driving Kills. Okay, I think we all know that. I think it's a lot of relevance to many students. They understand it, and it's a good way to write an argumentative essay. And so they've got to think about what they are arguing for and against. They're arguing for texting and driving, or they are arguing against texting and driving. And then you can give an example of a typical topic sentence there. You should always use the word should in the topic sentence. Passengers should refuse to ride in any vehicle driven by someone who texts while driving. Okay, so there is their statement that they make as their topic sentence of the argumentative essay. And I just say they should use these words in that topic sentence. But how could you promote this kind of essay? Often by using visual aspects of it and brainstorming why you shouldn't text and drive, or who texts and drive, when do people text and drive, what kind of texting and driving happens, what is used to text and drive. So you can have a whole texting and driving mind map with all the different aspects of texting and driving, using a visual and stories for the students to share, because all of them have experienced this. I'm sure you don't do that. And then as well as giving the issues that happen when people do text and drive, and this comes into injuries and accidents and sharing as well. So this makes what they're going to write about, reasons for texting and driving, reasons why you shouldn't text and drive, makes up a nice, quite an argumentative type of essay, and they've really discussed the different words, the kind of structures that are needed in this. Right, let's go into reading, which is also very important. They say if you can't read, you're not going to get to matric or do very well academically at higher education. So reading is very, very important. So in reading, we need to draw on knowledge of the peers, and we've got to build our understanding together of any topic. Remember, prior knowledge is very, very important in the classroom, and how do we get that? It's part of the CAPS document also. Not to give the students always the meanings, try and let them work out from the context. They can underline, I don't know, these words and say, well, okay, let's go back to that paragraph. You and your friend try and work out what that might mean. Don't write it for them on the board or tell them. If you allowed phones in class, you could ask them to Google the meaning, but they can try and work it out from the text, because this will help them for in exams as well. Ask them to predict the endings of paragraphs. You might just read one paragraph and say, well, how do you think the story is going to end? This person was texting and driving. What do you think the outcome was here? And predict the different kinds of endings. What about advertising? Visual literacy is so important. What is the purpose of visual literacy? Why have they used it? Which one would you use? And what are the different writing purposes you might use? Why are we arguing against texting and driving? What about the word use in advertisements and other texts? What kinds of words are used? Let's go look at an advertisement. Let them choose their own advertisement. Let groups choose different advertisements. And to analyze the words that are actually used without you telling them, let them try to discover it for themselves. Also look at literacy, images, symbols, and color. What do they indicate? And to discuss this, visual literacy goes from grade 8, grade 9, right through to matric, and students need to be able to discuss what the images are, what color indicates, what symbols mean. Okay, what is this picture I've just put up there? I'm sure no one has got any idea. And I think a lot of students would find this quite fascinating. It's about selfies. Okay, how many of us are guilty of taking selfies? So this is a good topic to start. A nice picture. Take selfies in class. Ask them what selfies mean. Who does it? Interesting topic. And yes, or quiz that they could do. Are you a selfie addict? Okay, so you could go through these questions. Do you often spend more time taking selfies than you mean to? And I must admit, I look around often and I see that this trend is quite prevalent. A lot of people are doing it a lot of the time. Okay, you go to a sports meeting, you see them taking selfies, happening all the time. So here's 10 questions. Last one is, does posting selfies make you feel more important? Okay, and they answer yes or no, and there's a little scorecard for them. So it's a nice way to orientate your lesson, talk about selfies, get them to do the little quiz, and they can see where they stand as a selfie person. And then you can read a little insert about this boy. His name is Danny Bowman, who actually became so addicted to selfies that he committed suicide. He couldn't survive without taking selfies. And you can see I've highlighted different words. I'm choosing the correct word. Some words are highlighted like aggressive, obsessive, synapse. And you can get them in groups to try and work out which is the correct word to use and what do the more difficult words mean. And you don't tell them. And they are quite captured by the actual story about this young 19-year-old who spent 10 hours a day taking up to 200 selfies of himself, and they're quite fascinated about the story. So it gives an authentic feel to what people are doing. Right, also is another piece of reading as well. Should students consider tablets instead of laptops? You can see it's also been highlighted sections, words that they can discuss, words that they can use. They've got lots of reasons why you should have a laptop, why you shouldn't have a laptop, why you should have an iPad, why you shouldn't have an iPad or a tablet. And then you can do comparative tables from this where they can identify 5 reasons for having a tablet, 5 reasons for having a laptop, how they are the same and how they are different. So there's lots of activities that can be generated from this altogether piece of reading. Okay, let's get on to listening. We've done listening before last week, so let's just see what they say about how we can have listening in the classroom. Right, we learn about the target language by listening to it. Yes, as you are listening to me and I listen to you, through your writing that is, you learn about the target language. You learn a lot from the target language. You hear the correct intonation from the person who's a home language teacher. You hear the correct pronunciation. Okay. My daughter, who had an Afrikaans teacher for matric, always spoke about, for biology, spoke about her caninis. I don't know if you know what caninis are, but they are canines. So pronunciation she heard in class was not correct. She also spoke about esophagus, which is the Afrikaans way you say esophagus. So these different words can be pronounced differently by not mother tongue speakers, but as a home language teacher, you should be able to speak the right intonation. If you're an FAL class teacher, you should be also able to do that. You should be able to break up the information you're hearing into recognizable chunks of information. I've got a niece who has got dystonia, and often I cannot understand what she is saying, but I look for words or phrases that I can try and piece together what she's saying, and I can so recognize what Nikki is telling me. So we can use different techniques to understand. If someone is speaking another language, I will hear different words, I may understand, and then I try and piece the conversation together. Then I can compare and discuss what I've heard with a friend. Okay, so you both listen to a piece of listening. Okay, I heard this, you heard that. Let's try and put this together. I can take notes while somebody's speaking, which you should do always. And I can ask questions and get more information. So you can ask your students, someone to read out a piece of news or to tell a story, and students must take notes and write down what they have said. Then they can ascertain how correctly they heard and did the person speak well enough. Okay, directions, instructions are perfect ways to listen as well. Here's something else, again from a TED Talk. Want to be more creative, go for a walk, and they could take notes from that TED Talk and then use this again for a mind map exercise, lean onto either a spoken exercise or on a written exercise. So you could use this all together. Some of my students say my teachers are not using listening and speaking. Guess what? Most of the time your teachers are using listening and speaking. They might be using it for something else, but you could focus on the listening and speaking sections. On this slide, you can see I put the IELTS link for listening. There it is. It gives you a wonderful, authentic type of listening exercises per IELTS test. And there's normally 4 different: a monologue, dialogue, a lecture, conversation on the telephone. And they provide the actual listening exercises and the answers. So if you want to use a practical listening exercise in the classroom, I'd really advise you to go and look at IELTS as well. So this is quite fascinating, and it gives you well prepared and ready to use listening exercises in the classroom. The next thing I want to look at, Jay, is listening to advertisements. This is also quite interesting because you can put very relevant and advertisements that are now available for classes to use within the classroom. This is one from the bank, and the right response to it.
In some Asian cities, it's considered acceptable for a commuter to fall asleep on the shoulder of a stranger. In New York, it's quite a different story. Of course, it could always adapt. We're the global bank that never underestimates the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
Okay.
What will they say about you? That you shouldn't be out here? That it is unladylike? That you're not built for this? Or maybe they'll say you're strong, that you can't be stopped, that you'll always find a way. That you make it look easy, that you make it look good. Or maybe they'll say you are the next big thing.
Right, so what about error correction? This is my big bugbears. People are so hung up on errors and correcting. So don't learners have to improve their form when they communicate meaning? Let's have a look at that. Yes, but how do we correct them? Big red pen, scowl, intonation. For example, someone is sharing something with you about their family, and you are understanding the meaning. Do you actually need to correct them? You don't say it like that, you say it like this. So if you're understanding what they are saying, you don't have to correct them. What can we correct? Well, if it's a serious error, it's a pronunciation error. I spoke about the caninis. Do you say it like that? Should you not say to the person it's canines? Because you might confuse someone if you use the pronunciation like that. What about the word? I said tub. I said bath instead of tub. Wasn't using the correct word. All right, so think about the way people understand different meanings of words, especially the United States, South Africa. Sidewalk, pavement have got different meanings. The bonnet, the boot, different meanings. So just check about the words that you are using. An interesting thing is first language interference. They say when it does start interfering with structure in the target language, you need to correct this because it's going to mess up the meaning. If you think about Afrikaans, the past tense, hy het gegaan, when the past tense comes at the end of the sentence, try that in English, he shop had to go. We wouldn't say it like that. It's messing up the whole structure of the sentence. So those kind of interference we have to correct. And if we use the wrong words for something, not tap for bath, but if the word is totally incorrect, you need to explain to the person you don't use that word. If I use kuluma for write, I'm wrong. Kuluma is speak. Write is bala. Okay, so someone should say to you, no, Marcel, if you want to say write, you must say bala. If you want to say jabula is happy, and I use tanda for that like, say no, it's not the same thing. So you need to tell the person the correct words. If it interferes with my language, understanding and meaning, then you can correct. So if I don't know what you are saying, I cannot get the meaning, we have to try and work out what the correct meaning is because there's no understanding. There's also a task on self-reflection. If you want to test what you do with errors, go to Ferreira page 97 to 98. There's a reflection task there. So what are the limitations of CLT? Well, you can say it's only approach for second language acquisition. However, as I said before, all learners benefit from an interactive teaching approach, even home language. I would say absolutely home language teachers, students and FAL students will also enjoy that. Well, you say it's sort of focusing on speaking skills only. No, not only that. All these skills can lead on to writing activities, reading activities, so all the skills can come into play. So not only speaking, you can also be writing, you can be listening, you can be reading as well. Oh, it's going to work in small classes. How can I do group work? I've only got 30 in my class. No, it can be used up for classes of 100 and more students. You can have 300 mass of students, and you can use this kind of talking exercise and commutative type learning exercise. I've done space. Well, I can't do this. But yeah, you can brainstorm in groups. You can work together in groups. Bring them together. You can use space in that way. I'm not going to develop those deep academic kelp type structures and discourse. All you have to do is ensure that you give them more time for reflection and insight so you can build to the next level, deeper understanding. You've done this task, now we're taking it to the next level. These are things about texting and driving. Now we're going to try and structure our argumentative essay. What are the reasons for texting and driving? What are the results of texting and driving? So you'd structure it that way. Grammar needs to be explicitly taught. I have to teach present continuous tense. I have to teach them how to use articles. I have to teach the indirect form. I have to teach passive voice or active voice. No, you don't. They're really not going to help, I'm telling you now. This can be introduced once they've identified the grammatical structure and they've formulated the rule themselves. They've actually realized what the rule is. I don't even remember, I told you about a student that she was a student who eventually realized how to use he or she in a sentence, because in Zulu or Xhosa, you've only got ufunda, could be she learns or he learns. And she eventually differentiated between he and she was so proud. She had formulated the rule and she would never forget it. I think with Afrikaans students, the concord is another issue. He is, not he are. We is, we are. Mistake is often made, but eventually they acquire the correct concord for that, for third person and second person and first person. And then they've got it. They've got the rule. So they do this by listening and experiencing. There's another self-reflection. What do you do? What do you think? In Ferreira as well. So that brings us to the end of today's learning event. Thank you for taking this journey with me. There is a case study to do based on CRT in Ferreira, and I have actually put the pages in as well on ECI, so it's your case study, plus the quiz 5, which is the on-track learning event from this lecture as well. So remember to apply these principles in your classroom, whether you're teaching home language or you're teaching first additional language. Always being cognizant that communicating for meaning is always going to be meaningful. Okay, so enjoy the rest of the week, get all those tasks up to date, and I'll see you next week for rubric design. Exciting stuff. Bye for now.